I'm Manny Rubio. I'm the president and CEO of Aboitiz Power, and you're tuned in to Power Podcast.
Welcome to Power Podcast, where we do an in depth discussion on all issues relevant to the Philippines energy sector with some of the most quotable newsmakers and important decision makers in the industry. Power Podcast is a production of Power Philippines, the only online publication in the country dedicated to covering energy development across the archipelago. We cover all news and issues which spark meaningful conversations among members of our growing online community. Like them, we believe that sustaining the growth of the energy sector is vital to the growth of the country itself. I'm your host, Nika Roque, and let's get on with the show.
And good day to all of you, whether you are watching on our Facebook or YouTube or listening to us via Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcast. Thank you for joining us in another episode of Power Podcast. I am Nika Roque, your host for this episode. The Philippines is looking to achieve a 35% renewable energy share in its generation mix by 2030 and 50% by 2040 as it begins its energy transition plan. With that, more and more generation companies have begun with their own transition plans to support the national goal. Aboitiz Power, the country's leading power generating firm, looks to be at the forefront of the national energy transition goal with its 50-50 balance in its energy portfolio by 2030. And here with us today to discuss the company's decarbonization journey is no other than the President and CEO of Aboitiz Power himself, Mr. Manny Rubio. Good day, Mr. Rubio. It is great to have you here on Power Podcast.
Good morning, Nika, and good morning to everyone that's listening and watching the podcast.
Okay, sir, let's get the ball rolling po. I'm sure that you're excited to share Aboitiz Power's plans with the Power Philippines community. So, first question, sir. While COP26 was happening in the United Kingdom last year, you said in a virtual briefing here at that Aboitiz Power is working on an achievable net zero plan. Now you have the 50-50 balance goal for your portfolio by 2030. So, sir, why take the 50-50 approach and not go full blast to 100% full RE instead?
Thank you for asking that question. I think it's very important, and a lot of people are interested to really understand that aspiration. No? As one of the largest industry players and one of the responsible industry players in the Philippines, Aboitiz Power aims to supply the country's requirements reliably. I think that's very important. No? And right now, as a developing country, we are aware of the challenges of decarbonizing our energy system. And a number have been are looking at the energy transition through the lens of renewable at all costs, right? And all full speed ahead and in all context narrative, meaning let's go 100% RE. No? But we believe in taking a well calculated and long term approach toward decarbonization. A decarbonized Philippines requires a well-managed shift, no? Just like and look at what's happening in Europe. I think they took the what I mentioned earlier, no. So it has to involve both sides of the energy system, the supply and demand, no? And this shift will happen over decades, involving all sectors' participation. And I think a decarbonized environment need not just be 100% RE. I think there are other technologies that need to be considered. There's of course discussions on hydrogen, or better yet, to a more efficient transport of hydrogen, ammonia, and of course small modular reactors. And we will continue to support the Philippine economic growth with diversified fleet of our assets. No, our existing capacities will help power the country during this change. And at the same time, we will triple our renewable energy portfolio, no, and bring us to the 50-50 that we articulated last year, and we are well on our way of achieving that. The Philippines will need all forms of energy to sustain the Filipinos' way of life and fuel the country's economic progress. So on this path, Filipinos having reliable electricity 24 hours a day, which allows children to study in the evening, families to buy their first refrigerator, or people to or families to buy their own cars. I think this is quite important, no? And these are just some of real life milestones that many Filipinos can attain as more lives become more prosperous as our economy grows.
Okay, sir, you made mention kanina po is supply and demand. So, how do you plan to achieve the 50-50 goal while at the same time provide stable and reliable supply to our nation?
Well, first we've set ourselves a target, no, of how much we want to actually develop in the next 10 years. We mentioned that we would like to have a net attributable capacity of 9,200 megawatts, regardless of technology. But 50% of that should be renewable energy. We have existing renewable energy capacity already. In fact, nameplate capacity is one of the largest in the Philippines. To bring us to the 50-50 to 9,200, we need to build at least 3,700 megawatts of renewable energy. And so far in the last 12 months, we have already started construction and or in a very advanced phase of execution. No? More than 1,000 megawatts of renewable energy, primarily solar facilities. And this will be available. The first one will be available first quarter of 2023, and most of it will come in at around 2024. So we're also undertaking enhancements in our existing facilities, like our Macban plant, sorry, our Tiwi plant, no, in Bicol, our geothermal plant, where we're adding another 15 megawatts of quite a technical term, a binary source of energy in a geothermal facility. And we've also just recently commissioned the 49 megawatts of energy battery energy storage in Mindanao, which is actually operating in conjunction with our diesel barge to provide ancillary service. No, and we've just actually completed the commissioning. And our joint venture with Scatec has also started its construction of a battery energy storage, 24 megawatts in our facility. So we are exploring different pathways to ensure that we achieve our aspirations, and one of these is of course also to provide stable base load, no, which the country badly needs. And our approach to this is, of course, LNG to power. Aboitiz Power having made pronouncements that we will not invest in new coal technology. So gas being considered as a transition fuel is something that we're looking forward to in as an option for our base load. Um, but when a cleaner technology and more and a cost competitive or as competitive as gas comes in, then we would revisit that option.
All right, sir. You mentioned the 9,200 megawatt goal of Aboitiz Power earlier. So, can you tell us what power sources will you guys prioritize to help reach this goal? Because I think 8 years are left to reach that.
Well, to achieve 9,200, no, of course, we are still commissioning a significant portion of that capacity, no, GN Power Dingginin. The two units are already operating at its maximum. The second unit is nearing its completion of commissioning, and which we expect to go on commercial operations by August. So our key strength as a power company is our diverse portfolio of energy sources. And in the next decade, our focus to grow our portfolio would be, of course, renewable energy. You know, having mentioned that at least we want to build 3,700 megawatts. But if we can build more, we'll build more, as we see that there is actually going to be demand for renewable energy. So other than the 3,700, we're of course looking at base load options. And today, as I mentioned, base load to be LNG to power. Cebu will need new capacity by at least earliest 20 sorry latest 2026, no? So I think Cebu will require additional capacity. And again, we have facilities in Cebu to by 150 megawatt coal plants. But since we mentioned that we will not anymore build new coal capacity, we would have to augment that with another unit, but using gas. And we're still deciding on where to actually to put it, as we have two options in Cebu. Luzon, since the requirement for additional capacity based on our estimate would be around 600 megawatts year on year. No? So there are, of course, opportunities, and it's not just us who will be adding capacities. No? But having said that, I think there will be the time frame that we're looking at is that by around 2028, 2029, that's the sweet spot that we're considering, where another 1,200 megawatts of baseload today, LNG to power, will be needed, and that's what we are planning for. And we're looking at our Pagbilao facilities to host that plant.
All right, sir. Allow me to sway away a little bit from the topic, considering that we have the National Renewable Energy Program. As we mentioned earlier, the target is 35% RE by 2030. Now, given that goal, sir, do you think the current administration, do you think it's fitting for the country to include or maybe even prioritize nuclear power at this time? Since, allow me to say it a little bit, I think the current administration under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is looking at prioritizing nuclear and probably even including nuclear power in the energy mix.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. And I think you've put me on the spot to provide my insight on the what the president believes. But I believe it is necessary for the country to continue exploring additional power sources and every technology. And I've mentioned this in previous interviews that I had. No, available that can ensure us reliable, cost-effective, and sustainable supply of energy. So it would be a great opportunity to participate in creating policies and implementing initiatives that are aligned with the framework for nuclear energy development in the country. So newer technologies such as small modular reactors may be viable power generation alternative. No? However, there are many requirements, no? Required permits, required country-to-country agreements, regulations, safety standards. No, I think this will take time. Local policies need to be developed. Technical know-how need to be developed. So we need to reskill, given the nuclear plant that we have, we had, since it's been mothballed. I think is way past its prime, no, and it's time again. I think to move to consider newer technologies, but we need to also look into social acceptability, and I think that's one of the toughest hurdles to manage. So government really needs to look at that. So given these factors, it is likely that the power industry, government, and the private sector, will need ample time to prepare. There are many technical, fiscal, and social hurdles to overcome, but we need to keep our options open. I think that's what we need to look at. And if France has significant nuclear capacity, Canada is the first country to try small modular reactors in a year or two. I think it's something that we really need to monitor and watch.
Mm. All right, sir. Just to follow through with that question, we currently have the mothballed Bataan nuclear power plant. Now, under the EPIRA law po kasi, please do correct me if I'm wrong, only private companies are allowed to enter power generation projects. So my question is, sir, is if ever the case happens, or if ever this happens, is Aboitiz Power willing and able to take over the possible revival of the DNPP?
Well, I think, as I said, no, I think there are many options that are available today, and we're open to explore all the options. No, but again, I think it's not just up to one entity like Aboitiz Power to push, given the hurdles, the challenges that one would be facing if one would like to develop a nuclear capability for power generation in the Philippines. I think there has to be very strong government support. No? And I think I heard also that the president mentioned in his SONA, no, that he's looking at reopening IPIRA and looking at some revisions. I think it's time to also update IPIRA. I think
Mhm.
there have been a number of developments, especially in terms of available technology. So in that context, I think we are interested to participate, as I mentioned earlier, in crafting policies to make sure that IPIRA is actually updated.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Going back, sir, you mentioned earlier that the country is in need of baseload capacity. Um, you currently have a partnership with the International Finance Corporation, which will study the viability of renewable energy as baseload power in the country. Can you walk us through on how you plan to approach this with your partnership?
Yeah, we're quite excited with this project. Aboitiz Power through SN Aboitiz actually had long working relationships with IFC. When I started, I was the president of SN Aboitiz Power, the hydro, and through IFC and their project financing, we're able to acquire these assets from the government. No? So on this specific project. Um, with knowledge and the technical know-how of and the infrastructure available to IFC. And I think that agreement that we have is to validate our view on how actually to we can move forward, when, what kind of technology, what's the cost, in considering a VRE, a variable renewable energy source, coupled with an energy storage system, whether that's a battery or any other technology that could store energy, be competitive, no, in today's environment. We have initially looked into this. We were looking at a 300 megawatt baseload opportunity of pure renewable energy. And after doing a lot of research, a lot of work, a lot of consulting, we believe that it's not yet viable today, given the
Mhm.
costs of this option, this alternative. It
Of the
won't be able to compete yet.
Yes, sir. Of the 300 megawatts of RE, what source of RE are we talking about here?
At the time
It,
when we were looking at that, I think for 300 megawatts, I think the requirement that in order to provide 100% capacity factor for pure RE, it's like 4,000 megawatts of solar and 1,800 megawatts of
oh,
battery energy storage. Don't I may not have those numbers, but it's around those figures. And so quite significant. So imagine the capacity that you have to build just to provide 300 megawatts.
meg-
So the immensity of the work to acquire the land to house anywhere from 3,000 to 700 to 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts of solar, I think it's quite challenging, no? And 1,800 batteries, again, it's also not technically challenging, but I guess financially it would be, given that today the largest operating battery, if I'm not mistaken, is the one in Australia at 100 megawatts, and here we are talking about 1,800. So just
mhm,
consider that context, right? So,
mhm. Yes, sir.
I'm
Uh,
excited with the output, and I think IFC is looking at coming up with an initial output of this study come October.
okay, sir. We will look forward to that study. You also have a partnership with Jera Asia, where the two of Aboitiz Power and Jera Asia will be working on liquefied natural gas projects for the country. Can you share with us updates on that partnership, sir?
Yeah. Well, Jera owns 27% of Aboitiz
Mm-hmm.
Power, and Jera is one, if not the largest buyer or trader of liquefied natural gas, no, given their assets in Japan and in Asia. So we are really looking forward to JERA's support, no, and expertise and technical know-how in our objective of putting up an energy to power facilities in the Philippines. So as I mentioned, we're looking at one in a small one in Cebu, which Cebu would be needing around 2026, 2027, and in Luzon by maybe earliest 2028, but maybe around 29, 2030. And that would be probably around 1,000 to 1,200. So, but we're not just working with JERA on LNG, no? And this is not just their expertise. We're also consulting them on renewable energy, and of course, they have made their declaration already of a net zero by 2050, and they are looking at achieving this through the use of ammonia
Mm-hmm.
in co-firing with ammonia. Um, and this is something that we're closely monitoring. This, I believe, this is something that's applicable to us, given that a number of our boilers are using fossil fuels. So co-firing with ammonia, or purely firing with ammonia in the long term, would certainly help us in our decarbonization journey. And that's something that we're closely monitoring and working with JERA.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. Allow me to go into the national scale now. Can we get your thoughts on Mr. Rafael Lotilla being the new Department of Energy Secretary? I understand that Mr. Lotilla was Aboitiz Power's lead independent director prior to his resignation last July 11.
Yes, he served as a independent director of Aboitiz Power, and I'm happy and excited, no, about the appointment of Popo Lutilla as the new energy secretary. No, I believe his reputation and track record as a faithful public servant are hallmarks of his success throughout his career. And I've known him since several administrations ago, and I'm really looking forward to having Popo Lutilla as secretary. I think the industry really needs someone like Popo.
What can the power industry players like Aboitiz Power can expect from Mr. Lotilla given his experience in the energy sector?
I guess the industry, and you mentioned the industry players and the industry can look forward to with Secretary Lutilla at the helm, to working with the rest of the energy sector on building upon the accomplishments of the Department of Energy in the past administrations, not just the previous ones. No? It continuously driving the Philippine sustainable energy transition. That's very important. After all, he has the experience and proven track record in the energy sector. And he's also a respected member of the energy community, both in private and in public sectors. No? And Secretary Lutilia was quoted recently expressing the mission of the DOE, which is integrity and professionalism. I think this is what the industry can expect from Secretary Lutilia.
Okay, sir. And how would you want the new administration, given Aboitiz Power is one of the top industry players in the country, how would you want the administration to approach the energy crisis that we currently have today?
Yeah. Well, listening to the president during his sauna and in a number of interviews and his YouTube videos, no, we are aligned with the president on his key priority to increase the level of energy production. That's very important. By looking at every possible option appropriate for the Philippines, for the country, we support the administration's thrust for more renewable energy and likewise the focus on natural gas generation as the transition fuel, to add capacity to the grid. And this will be critical once achieved to the transition to a decarbonized Philippines. We also support the recent statement of DOE Secretary Lutilla to improve electrification targets because at the moment there's still, I think, more than 1 million households that have yet to be electrified, and a lot of it in Mindanao. So, being a major distributor or distribution utility in Mindanao, we are actually looking forward to assisting and helping DOE achieve this target of bringing power to all households in the Philippines, regardless of where you are, regardless of class. No, and I think, and this is the only way we can really power the country and achieve our economic goals.
Yes, sir. So, the administration is currently working on electrification and at the same time with the
Transition.
uh, energy transition. So, how do you think should the new administration approach its transition energy plan or energy transition plan rather?
Yeah. Well, I think they have a number of options. They're considering a number of options, but and there are also a number of challenges that we have to hurdle first before we actually really push for the a full transition. No. Um, Well, for one, and I'll digress first on your on the answers to the approaches. No, but the current issues I think that we need to address the crisis that you're talking about is, I think ERC really needs to look at the way the rules in WESM, the rules in IMOP, particularly the secondary price cap that's in place. Commodity prices have increased significantly since the Ukraine crisis. I think the current rules are not suited to address those concerns. Although recently ERC issued a directive allowing coal plants to actually recover costs or ask for additional compensation if the secondary price cap, when triggered, actually is lower than the cost of fuel. And I'm sure it is, given how much coal is today and how much LNG is today. So, but that adds to the complexity of the process. So maybe I guess from 625, just a little bit and more realistic secondary price cap should be considered. And I think to really address grid stability, co-optimized market needs to happen and needs to happen soon, no? So that we can ensure the right amount of energy and the right amount of ancillary services are actually available for NGCP. Now, going to your question on approaches to the energy transition, as mentioned earlier, we at the Aboitiz Power believe in taking a well-calculated and long-term approach towards decarbonization, and decarbonized Philippines requires well-managed shift. No, we don't want to happen what's happening in Europe at the moment, or what's happening in Australia, where the price of power is actually getting to be really expensive. Just making decisions that, okay, by this time all coal plants should be shut down, but probably lacking of alternatives. What would be the replacement facility? No, so with that said, the new administration should approach its energy transition with foresight and resolve. No, foresight to explore all possible sources of energy that can be utilized to fuel economic activities of a developing country, to enable the fullest potential of our country, and then in the economy. And a well-crafted transition plan means it should address energy security as we decarbonize. That's important. We cannot just
Mhm.
decarbonize and have brownouts, no. And I think that's something that our people cannot accept. The government should also implement this plan with resolve. Okay, important. Tough decisions will need to be made, and some of them may not be popular. As may again, maybe it could result to higher costs in the short term, but lower costs in the long term. No? But these are actually necessary for the greater good. The new administration expresses a lot of ambition and optimism for the country's progress in the coming years. Thus, firm steps need to be taken to ensure that there's reliable and sustainable supply of electricity. But at the same time, also proceed with the decarbonization and transition to a state where we achieve our 35% goal of renewable energy.
And with that, thank you so much, Mr. Rubio, for answering our questions. I'm sure that the Power Philippines community still wants to learn a lot more from you, but unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. With that, can we get any final thoughts from you, sir?
Well, thank you, Nika. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share our thoughts, our insights on the energy situation in the country. And as I mentioned, no, at the start of this conversation, we at Aboitiz Power take to heart our commitment to deliver responsibly produced, reliable, and energy that takes into consideration environmental sustainability. And again, we are committed to delivering in our commitment of 50-50 renewable energy to thermal by 2030, and beyond that, a fully decarbonized Aboitiz power. I still cannot give the year. I've always been asked that, but we don't just want to give a date. To me, I still believe that given a certain commit to a certain date without knowing the technologies that will be available, whether those can be competitive or not, I think would just be just giving a statement. No, but rest assured, we are well on our way towards reducing our emissions, and yes, and then just look forward to a greener future.
And on that note, maraming salamat po sa inyo, Aboitiz Power President and CEO, Mr. Manny Rubio, for joining us. And we hope to see you again in our future episodes.
Thank you. Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat.
And that wraps up today's Power Podcast. Tune in next time as we converse with the movers and shakers of the country's energy sector. For your comments and suggestions, shoot us a message on Power Philippines Facebook Messenger account or email us at news.powerph@gmail.com. And of course, be updated on the country's energy sector by visiting powerphilippines.com and by liking us on Facebook. Just search for Power Philippines. I'm Nika Roque and have a powerful day ahead.